Okay, everybody, what's going on? This is Luke with Owls TV. I know that it's been a little minute since we've posted our last video. I just want to say that we have been warming up nicely for 2022 and really want to be focused on the educational content we're going to be putting out. And this video that we have for you today is an interview that I did with Kyle from Colorado Chromatography Labs. And they were the first company to come out with HHC. If you've got any questions about HHC, they will be answered in this video. We'll also have the timestamps below so you can skip through it in case you don't want to or don't have the time to listen to it all. So hang tight, everybody, because here it comes. And just the last thing I'll say before we go is that the video quality was a little poor due to the internet connection we had. The audio is perfect. So just give it a listen. Every single question you have about HHC is going to be answered. I just want to say a big shout out to Colorado Chromatography Labs, Colorado Chromatography Labs for giving me the time to put together this video, because it is something that we know here at Owls that we all have a lot of questions, and I feel that Kyle answered basically all of them. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So everybody, we're here today for a very special episode on Owls TV. We have Kyle from Colorado Chromatography Labs, and we are going to be answering some of the questions that you have asked us on YouTube. And we are just trying to get the most informed opinion about HHC, some of these new cannabinoids. And Kyle, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about Colorado Chromatography Labs, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Thanks for the warm introduction, Luke. My name's Kyle Ray. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Colorado Chromatography Labs, one of the co-founders as well. We were initially founded in April of 2019, and then we rebranded as Colorado Chromatography Labs in 2020. And when we first got into the business, we were actually focused on doing THC remediation. And this was at the boom of the hemp industry back when things were way overpriced and overvalued, and everyone thought that CBD would make your hair grow, make your teeth white, make your joints not ache, do everything and anything. And so we lived through the crash, and we had to be extremely adaptable. And that's kind of what led us to the minor cannabinoids and the synthesis aspect of things. We decided to, for once in this industry, to try to actually get ahead of the game and stop trying to play catch up.
Yeah, and it's really tough to do so. And I really think that, I'm sure you've noticed it as well as just the amount of people who've had to drop out, right? Those who just went all in on one thing and weren't versatile enough. And not only that, but I think that it comes back to, like, you can't just be a processor anymore, right? You can't just be like, hey, I'm selling CBD. You have to have something that has a little more purpose behind it. And I think that's definitely where we share a lot of the same similarities. And so, just to break it down from the very start, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about like how you came to create HHC? Because I remember watching your Instagram, and I remember you put up this photo of all these leaders, and you were asking everybody, what was it? And I had remember hearing about HHC as this, this new wonderful cannabinoid, and here you guys are, and you were one of the first to put it out. So just if you could let our viewers know, like, how does something like that come to be, and how long does that process take, and what did it take for you to actually eventually get there?
Yeah, no, most definitely, I'd be more than happy to. So HHC, again, it's not something that we actually invented ourselves. It was discovered in the 40s and created in the 40s. Yep. This is something that we've been able to commercialize and really bring to scale. And of course, the biggest hurdle we actually discovered HHC over a year ago in a method that we use to synthesize CBN. And the issue was there was no standard for it. We had no idea what it was. We had an idea of what it was from a chemistry perspective, like it makes sense that this is what would be made in this synthesis, but that was kind of the end of it. We were worried about CBN, not this byproduct. And we were sitting around in our new lab that was in Parker, Colorado, and trying to figure out, what the next big thing is. We were really we were frustrated with the minor cannabinoid market because it is so new, it is so infantile that a lot of these cannabinoids just don't have a home. Like CBT, for example. I can make you a lot of CBT, but for $10,000 a kilo, it's a very expensive cutting agent for carts, and that's really the main use of it right now. So it's just, a lot of these things don't have a home. You can't move the kind of volume you really want to move. And of course, we knew that delta-8 THC, you can move more volume on that than you could ever imagine. You can move thousands and thousands of kilos. So we knew that we needed to make something that was a delta-8 replacement, essentially. And so then we actually dug into some readings, and one of the cannabinoids we were looking at was HHC as a psychoactive replacement to delta-8. And we did some diving. We found the psychoactivity studies to determine that, yes, this isomer of HHC is as psychoactive as delta-9. And from there, we actually, the first 20 grams of HHC that we made using that same CBN method, and we purified out those HHC fractions via chromatography. And once we did that, it took us about 2 or 3 weeks to make 10 or 20 grams. It was a slow time. Yeah, we were trying lots of things out and just trying to figure out, what makes the most sense to get a really pure compound and what's the best way to get there. And we finally made some. And the thing is somebody had to try it to test if it's psychoactive. Because at the end of the day, that's what sells this, is the psychoactivity aspect.
Sure.
And so I was actually the first one to try it. I decided to go ahead and smoke it up. We tested it. We got solvent tests on it. We had NMR on it. We're like, okay, this is what it is. The only thing we don't have is a total purity because we don't have the standards yet. But I'm extremely confident that we've done a thorough purification. So I'll go ahead and try it. I tried it, and
how did you try it? Like, did you eat it? Did you vape it? Like, how did you do it?
I dabbed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must have been this moment of like you inhale and then suddenly everyone's like, he's still here. Like everything's okay. It's like,
yeah,
like, how you feel?
Exactly. I was a little nervous, but I'm usually the guinea pig for a lot of our new things. So I'm not that worried about it. I do like my new and exciting novel cannabinoids. But I definitely was getting, strong psychoactive effects from it, but I didn't trust myself that it was in fact a psychoactive molecule because of course I want it to be psychoactive. It's kind of almost a placebo effect because I know that if this is psychoactive, I could be onto the next big thing, and I didn't want to trust myself with that. So then we actually got some NDAs sent out to some companies, and we wanted to let some product manufacturers try it to really see if it is truly psychoactive. Because again, we're making CBN, we're making CBC, we're making THCV. We don't necessarily want to shut all that down, go completely on a left turn here for something that may or may not be psychoactive.
Sure.
But when the product manufacturers gave us back their feedback, they said, "This is freaking amazing. Do you have 100 kilos? I'll buy 100 kilos from you right now." And we're like, "Oh, I got like 10 grams, and it took me weeks to make these 10 grams." But they were adamant that we had just found the golden goose. This was it. This was the next big thing, and we needed to change our focus completely to that. And so then we spent another probably month doing some research and development with regards to trying to actually do a hydrogenation and make pure HHC instead of having to do this roundabout chromatography method. And
just before we move forward with that, can you explain to our viewers or people who may not be familiar with what does that actually mean when you say a hydrogenation process? What exactly is that?
Yeah, most definitely. So a hydrogenation is going to be a reduction. So you're going to be adding hydrogens and losing electrons across those double bonds. So essentially you have the double bond that defines, delta 9 versus delta 8 versus delta 10. That olefin is what it's called in the chemistry world. in order to hydrogenate something, you're going to actually be adding hydrogens across that double bond and making something what's called fully saturated. And they actually do something similar to vegetable oil, and that's how they make margarine. So this is not a new process. This is something that's been done for, this is done for hundreds of years, and it's actually generally regarded as safe. I mean, no one ever thinks twice when they go get a stick of margarine and eat it. They don't wonder if this is dangerous, if this has been converted, if it has heavy metals in it. So for us, we're basically just taking, and we're taking an approach of a hydrogenated cannabis oil instead of a hydrogenated vegetable oil. And so that's what a hydrogenation is, as compared to a dehydrogenation, which is actually the way we initially made it. And that is a high temperature reaction where instead of removing electrons and adding in hydrogens across those double bonds, you actually add in more electrons and create more double bonds. And that's actually how you make CBN, is with an oxidative dehydrogenation.
Fascinating. And so when I'm, we're talking about this, okay, we're going to be adding hydrogen. How does one achieve that, right? Like, how does that process look like for making, like, we've got a good explanation of what hydrogenation is, but how do you actually do that? How do you add hydrogen?
So adding hydrogen, there's a lot of different catalysts you can use, and the key is always you need a hydrogen source, you need a hydrogen-based atmosphere. So whether that's pure hydrogen gas or other hydrogen sources, that can be, you can kind of make hydrogen in situ if you need to. Basically, in the reaction, you add something that will develop hydrogen gas and saturate it that way. And that's actually part of what we were able to do. And that's how we were able to get a patent on it, is because we are doing a unique method that's not already been patented. And then I'm sure you want to hear about these metal catalysts. So the common metal catalysts are going to be rhodium, ruthenium, iridium, palladium, platinum, and raney nickel. Those are going to be your most common hydrogenation catalysts. They're extremely dangerous. They are very pyrophoric. And so when I say dangerous, I mean very dangerous to work with. They are, however,
they can basically create, explosions, or they basically can, start fires very easily, right? Is what we mean by that.
Exactly. So if these catalysts are dried completely and exposed to oxygen, they will actually spontaneously combust, which is never fun. Actually, a couple of weeks back, we had one of our lab techs who improperly disposed of some paper towels that were saturated with this catalyst, and he was wiping off something. He disposed of them improperly, and our trash can burst into flames. So crazy. It's no joke, but it is. The nice part about them, kind of, is that they are heterogeneous. So that means that they never actually dissolve into the solution. So for example, if you dissolve your THC in a hydrocarbon, now it's a solution. It's all mixed together in a solvent. These catalysts, they don't mix in like that. They stay as a solid. So they actually are able, you can just filter them out of the reaction, and it's pretty simple to get them out. It gets a little more complicated when you go up to, multi-ton scale of getting these filtrations done. But on a smaller scale, especially in our R&D phases, the filtration was always a breeze.
Great.
But so I guess sorry, go ahead.
So I just touching, while we're touching on the metal catalysts, this brings up a very important topic, which a lot of members of the parliament have been asking about. It's like, how do we know that some of these products are safe, right? And how do we know that there isn't metals in them? Because I know that you have just listed off 8 different metal catalysts, and often there's 4 catalysts, there's 4 metals that are often tested for in cannabis. And so that's really the first thing is, hey, people are looking into, hey, I want to try this new cannabinoid. How can they identify if, like, hey, I just bought this from the Colorado Chromatography Labs, they have the patent, they've done it, they've got all the testing, great, but then they don't really know if they're buying HHC from somebody else. Is it just somebody just jumped on the bandwagon and they don't have adequate testing. So can you just try to give us your best understanding of like, how do we purchase safe products, and what do we need to look out for when we're looking at test results to know if this is a safe product or not?
Most definitely. And I'll try to keep it concise, because I can just talk about this for hours and hours and hours. But so what we do is a touch of cannabis with a touch of biochemistry, or with a touch of biotechnology and a touch of pharmaceutical. It's kind of how we view ourselves. We view ourselves as a biotechnology company that is in the hemp space and cannabinoid space, not a hemp company that makes. And so for us, we understand, because we have the expertise here, that we're no longer playing the cannabis game, right? We're not looking for lead, cadmium, mercury, and arsenic in our stuff because it was absorbed through the plant, through the ground. That's not what we're looking for anymore. We got to look for these specific catalysts. We got to look for these specific chemicals. And that's when we started working with Galbraith Labs, is who we work with. Mm-hmm. And they are a big time biotechnology testing company. They can test for just about anything and everything. So in order to look for these metals, you actually have to specifically go outside of cannabis and do your own due diligence. That's the biggest thing, is that the processors, it is on, in my opinion at least, it is on them to provide all of these necessary tests in order to make something that is safe and reliable to sell, right? And so we do something called an elemental analysis using an ICP-MS with Galbraith Labs. And we do test for palladium, platinum, rhodium, ruthenium, and iridium, down to about 2 parts per billion.
And just so everybody knows, is that a regular cannabis test result, a COA, when people look at this, more often than not, they're not going to have any of that information, right? At most, they may have 4 of the hemp metals, right, which is derived predominantly from growing hemp, and it gets sucked up into the plant. But really where this industry is going to, what I'm hearing you say is that we need to be going far deeper into a lot of these elements that are actually being used for these processes. And for majority of companies, that they're still on the hemp train, right? They're still going to the hemp labs.
Exactly.
And it's not adequate.
Exactly. It's just completely not adequate. And the issue is that this industry has such a lack of regulation right now that it's really the wild, wild west. If a company wants to, they don't have to have anything and they can go sell something. You don't need any of these tests. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to set the standard with regards to, if you want to play chemist, you have to do your due diligence and prove that what you're making is safe, is free of your reactants, free of your catalysts, free of your solvents. Because again, I'm not just doing a hemp extraction anymore. I'm not just making CBD isolate. I'm doing real chemistry. And if you want to play the game of a biotech pharmaceutical company, you better act like it. Otherwise, this whole place is going to get shut down. And so for me, I think the most important thing for the consumer is to continually be asking questions of these brands, of these retail stores, and push them to provide these tests. Because I'll be totally honest with you, the amount of fake COAs, full panels, everything that I've seen our own COA been ripped off hundreds of times in the past 7 months. Yeah. And it's disgusting. And it's really difficult to be able to, as a consumer, to really be able to trust what you see. Because I mean, I went out and bought some HHC vape carts the other day to see what's out there.
All Delta 8 or something, is it?
It was all Delta 8.
Yeah.
And there was some CBN.
It's not actually
in it.
funny. It's really not funny. Yeah, it's really disgraceful. And we actually just the other day, our last couple of videos ago, I mean, it's funny, we were just looking at the mislabeling of because there isn't any regulation. And I know, and of course, when you're involved in the industry, when people are talking about like 98, 99% cannabinoids in like a vape cart, it's just not really realistic, especially after you have added your terpenes and especially when you're doing some of this at scale. And we tested some Delta 10, and what do you know? It's predominantly Delta 8. And then I hear it's like, I think what was very important that I heard here is that you, Kyle, had the smart idea to say, hey, I'm probably biased here and I need to get other people to try this. But for a consumer, when they pick up a product and they look at it and they say, this is Delta 10, and they try it, they go, oh, whoa, I'm getting a psychoactive feeling. This is Delta 10. Whoa, this feels great. What they don't realize is it's actually just Delta 8, but it's watered down. And I try to give people like often, especially with Delta 10, I mean, I have people that they say, oh, Delta 10, it's like a sativa. It's like a sativa. And I go, oh yeah, like Delta 8. And I ask them like, how much Delta 10 is in there? And more often than not, they don't know, or they haven't tried the compound isolated itself. And I ate 50 milligrams of purified D10, and I'm not quite sure of the isomer, because I have heard that similar to HHC, D10 has a couple of different isomers, and maybe it's possible that one is more psychoactive than the other, but certainly the 50 milligrams that I ate did nothing. And so I think this leads well into like how do we help people to really know? It's like, I think you said there, just ask more questions. Like, we're doing our best to educate on our channel, but it really comes back to, I think, the consumers and them being educated and saying no when they buy a product and they can't actually get answers for it.
Well, I have a few pieces of advice. So again, when I tested this cart and it tested as almost completely Delta 8, there's actually no HHC in there at all.
Oh, stop.
If you scan the barcode on it, it takes you to a COA, says it's 97% HHC. So even if there's a barcode on it and it takes you to a COA, that doesn't necessarily make that a real trustworthy manufacturer or trustworthy brand, because they can just lie. I would say one of the biggest things that I've learned is that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So if someone's offering you HHC carts for $10, it's probably not HHC. You know what I mean? It's, again, this cannabinoid has come down drastically in price. When we launched it, it was at $10 a gram. Currently, we're selling it for as low as $2.25 a gram. So it's gone down by over 75% over the course of the last 7 months. And that's because we've been able to scale it and able to push it really to the limits of what's possible. But even then, if it sounds too good to be true, if it's the same price as Delta 8, it's probably just Delta 8, or who knows what it could be. It could be cut with MCT oil. And so my first piece of advice is, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And my second piece of advice is really, really press these brands. I know it's annoying. I know you don't want to make a call to these guys and say, who do you buy your HHC from? How do you know? And if they don't know what they're talking about, don't go with them. Because truthfully, there's so much misinformation, especially when you get to these newer cannabinoids, that somebody who's selling you real HHC knows what they're talking about. Somebody who's just bought something from some guy who said it was HHC and it says it on the jar that they bought, and so they put it into a cart and they couldn't get it tested, so they didn't get it tested, and then they just sold it. You'll kind of be able to tell when you talk to them.
Yeah, I remember I was at a convention, and of course, a lot of hemp is being sprayed, and the end consumer doesn't necessarily realize like how that actually happens, right? And of course, it's either super cold, it's either super hot, or it's sprayed with solvents. And I went around and I asked a lot of these providers, like, so tell me, what was the infusion process like for this product? And they said, we don't know. And I was just like, I'm not even going to like entertain any of your other products then, because if you are selling like products that people are going to consume and you have literally no idea or no care to even ask questions about like, where does this come from? It means that you're not caring about heavy metals, you're not caring about pesticides. And it's literally just like, we can buy this product and we can sell this product. And if the consumers buy it, great. Consumers aren't really that smart anyway. Let's just give it to them. And I'm so thankful that we were able to have this conversation so that people can actually do their best to get educated. And I'll tell you this, HHC has been one of the hottest topics that we have been talking about. And I know Delta 8 was big, but in my opinion, Delta 10 flopped. It's definitely nothing, at least what I've been able to see right now. And then HHC is definitely the next big thing. And often what I hear from people is that HHC is very similar to Delta 9 and compared with Delta 8. And if you could try to help us explain, like why does it lean more towards Delta 9 than Delta 8 THC?
So it's all going to come down to the binding affinity at that CB1 receptor. So according to the most recent receptor binding studies that we've been able to find, the 9R form of the HHC does bind to that CB1 receptor in almost an identical way to that of Delta 9 THC. The 9S isomer does bind in a weaker fashion, as I'm sure you've been aware of. That isomer is that's kind of its own story. I can tell you if you want to hear about it. But
please
that
do.
isomer, it is still psychoactive.
Yeah, just if you can
I'd be
give,
more than
I
happy.
think this is one of the biggest things about HHC, and I'm so happy we're talking about it now, because some people may buy a product with HHC, they don't check the results, and they wonder, why didn't this have an effect? And they don't realize that they bought something that maybe has, you look at a test result and it could be predominantly the 9S isomer. And so if you could just share with us a little bit about them, I think we'd be super thankful.
Oh, most definitely. So I guess let me start off by saying this. So right now, our biggest competitors on the market are not other HHC manufacturers. It's other people that are claiming to be HHC manufacturers. So kind of touching on what we've been talking about this whole time with the Delta 10 thing, that a lot of the Delta 10 out there is fake. I would say right now, the majority of the HHC, not the majority, but about at least half of the HHC on the market out there is imposter or not as advertised or cut with something. And that's because money talks at the end of the day when it comes to these supply chains. So even if you get an HHC cart and you smoke it and you don't feel the effects of it, I'm going to tell you right now that it's probably because we didn't make it. And that's not trying to brag. That's just me truthfully seeing what's out there, and it's scary. But so S versus R. So the thing about HHC is there's actually 8 possible diastereomers. There's not just the 2. And you'll actually be able to see one of those additional diastereomers on the chromatogram from our samples. We have not yet been able to create a standard for that isomer because it is made in such a low quantity that the purification is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we will be making that, and we are working on it, but it's a work in progress. But basically, there was a study on some rhesus monkeys, I want to say 20 or 30 years ago. Actually, 40 years ago.
It's crazy.
Now.
It's just crazy to think 40 years ago they were already testing this stuff.
And so when they gave it to these monkeys, they were using polarimetry to test their HHC. And so polarimetry, from a really 10,000 foot view, is essentially you launch polarized light at a molecule and see the direction that it's rotating when it comes back to you. So there's a direction called dextrorotatory and levorotatory, or plus, minus. And so back in the day, they made this HHC probably in a pretty similar way to a lot of the good HHC being made out there. And they tested it using polarimetry, and they found a plus and they found a minus. So the assumption is that R is your plus and S is your minus. Now the issue with that is, assuming that there's 8 diastereomers, it's a little bit difficult to determine, are these 4 all minus? Are these 4 all plus? Is it 2 or plus, 6 or minus? Because polarimetry has really fallen off in the recent years because of HPLC, GCMS, NMR, all these better, more thorough analytical options that exist today. So polarimetry has kind of fallen off. So basically they lumped these 8 potential diastereomers down to 2 categories. So to say that the S HHC, and again, the S is short, so it's actually 6AR, 10AR, 9S HHC, and 6AR, 10AR, 9R HHC. It's going to be your full name for those. So you can flip the S's and the R's in each of those categories to make all these different isomers. And So while the data does suggest that the minus HHC isomer, which is currently assumed to be the SHHC isomer, is about 1/10 the strength of the R, or the plus, and it's assumed that the plus is about 10 times stronger than the minus. The assumption there again is that the plus is R and the minus is S. And I do believe that the plus is R, but I do believe that there's a little more gray area in there with regard to these other 8 diastereomers that could exist. But all that being said, the data currently suggests, based on that study, that the R-HHC isomer 9R is the more potent version and is about 10 times more potent, or about as potent as delta 9. Whereas the 9S HHC isomer is about 1/10 the potency of the 9R. So if you have something that's 50% R, 50% S, you can basically, when comparing it to delta 9, you can say it's going to be 50% of delta 9 because of that R, and then about 5% delta 9 from that S. So that cart would be about 55% the strength of a pure 99% delta 9 cart, if that makes sense.
That's a great, yeah, I think.
And in terms of the binding affinity at the receptors in comparison to like delta 8, it does have a substantially stronger binding affinity, the 9R-HHC, than delta 8. And that's probably why people are describing it as more similar to delta 9, because it is more similar to delta 9 in terms of its binding affinity. It's just only a certain percentage of that molecule in the mixture is binding with the same strength as delta 9.
Fascinating. So I suppose the next question is when you are making HHC, can you explain to us what your typical COA looks like when versus the 9 versus the S? What does your COA typically look like?
Yeah, so our cutoff point for the R is 45%. So as long as it's greater than 45% R, that batch is considered in spec, it's acceptable. Typically, these catalysts that are used in this hydrogenation, the metal catalysts, are going to be the main factor with regards to how your ratio looks. And to be totally truthful with you, it is more expensive to make higher levels of R. Generally, if you use a lot fresher catalyst, you're going to get a lot higher R percentage. Or if you use more expensive catalysts, then you'll get higher R percentages. Now, this is good and bad, because again, it's good because that means we do have a pretty effective way to be able to get somebody something that's 70 to 75% R. However,
crazy. You've gotten it up to 75% R. That's impressive.
Yeah, the highest we've ever seen was a 75-20 split. And we're actually currently R&D'ing how to make R isolate without any S in it. However, we're debating whether or not the market is ready for something like that with regards to the price. Because again,
I would say no. I would honestly say no. What I think though is I think about like for a brand like ours that really cares, yes, but there's not a lot of businesses that are interested in really paying more for things, and often everybody wants to do things as cheap as possible, and that ends up people cutting corners. And so I totally get that. I mean, it is when there's so much disinformation out there, it's hard for people to become educated and know what is actually sufficient and real. And so I'm sure if you did it, you'll do it before anybody else. That's for sure.
I appreciate that. We spend a lot of time, money, and effort on R&D, so I do appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, these guys, a lot of them at least, I shouldn't say everybody, because there are a lot of brands that really care. But a lot of these bigger brands, they don't care. They just want to have it on the box. If it's on the box, they're good. It doesn't mean if it says HHC and there's 2% HHC, they didn't lie. You know what I mean? That's kind of a lot of people's opinion in this industry. And we're trying our best to try to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed it the same with THCP and THCP carts being labeled as that. And I'm like, it's literally not financially feasible to sell a cart for $50 if it was just pure THCP. And then you look at it and actually it's 1% THCP and the rest is Delta 8. Mm-hmm. And I like, how do you, exactly. So I wonder how, is it, it has to be like self-regulation or something, right? Like how does this change? Of course we mentioned about the consumer, but like, how does this get fixed? Is it like a coming together of other brands who say like, hey, this is what we want. Here's the stamp of like, we went through these processes.
So I think there's a couple of approaches, right? One thing that we've actually been toying with in the recent months, based on all of this crazy material that's floating around in the market, is we're actually considering creating a powered by Colorado Chromatography insignia that our people that buy our product can use on their brand. To let the consumer know that this was made by Colorado Chromatography. We're not sure if the consumer really cares, if the consumer knows who we are or what that means.
I think a lot of consumers know who you are. I do. I think a lot of consumers know that Colorado Chromatography started HHC, and I know that a lot more consumers now, even just from this, will know that you were the first, and at the end of the day, you have more data than anybody else. And so if you're buying products, you need to buy them from companies that are legitimate, that you can talk to someone, that you can see who they are. Because again, I think, Kyle, you even coming on here is huge, because more often than not, people are afraid. Especially, that was the one thing for us at the very start. We said, we get it. People are afraid. Delta 8 THC, you know, it is scary when we first start, but at the end of the day, your integrity is extremely important. And a lot of the times there's these companies that no one knows who they are, who the company's owners are, where they're even located. And the last thing you want to do is be buying cannabinoids that are in essence just being tried out without adequate testing.
Exactly. And I think, you know, touching back on the idea of how else can we tackle this, I think, you know, a powered by Colorado Chromatography, that's our own personal incentive. That's something we're still playing with. Obviously, there's a lot of different considerations that need to be taken into account before we're able to put our name onto these brands like that. Yeah. However, I think it really comes down to the question, because if we don't do internal regulation, if we don't work with the leaders in this hemp industry to say, okay, I think right now your cannabis testing for cannabis products is adequate. It's not excellent, but it is adequate. Now, it's when you start doing these big chemistry modifications, like adding acids or adding bases, adding metals, adding all these different chemicals, that you are now no longer in cannabis, and we need to start basically make it our own regulation for what needs to happen to these converted cannabinoids. Because without that, you're basically playing a pharmaceutical, you're playing like you're a pharmaceutical company while testing like you're a cannabis company. And that just leads to dangerous byproducts, leftover catalysts, non-neutralized acids. The list goes on, and it's really scary. And so I think there needs to be some kind of coalition within the hemp industry for us to step up, say that this is a problem, this is how we can address it, and start taking steps towards that. Because if we don't do that, I can tell you the government will. They're going to come in, and they're going to be a lot meaner than anyone else.
Yeah, it really, because the other thing, and this is obviously you need to be very, confidential about new cannabinoids or anything you're working on, but like, I feel that this can very quickly go the wrong way, right? Where suddenly it's like we're so far removed from like, hey, this is a cannabinoid. And we've done like just this catch-up game of like, okay, well, this was illegal, now move to the next one, and there's not enough research done. Eventually, someone gets seriously harmed, or someone hasn't gotten the necessary test results. They consumed a product, or even worse, they consumed a product or their kids got a hold of it because there wasn't adequate, child-safe packaging. And so I wonder with you, like, where do you see this industry going in the next like 3 to 5 years? This going to be like, okay, this is like, we've got a good couple of years, and then it's just we're done? It's going to be licensing? Where do you see this all going with these new cannabinoids that are coming out?
Most definitely. So I see it. This is what I see personally, and we believe as a company what's going to happen. So we believe that hemp and marijuana will be separate for the not indefinite future, but for at least the next decade or two. I think they're going to draw a line in the sand between psychoactive and non-psychoactive. And I think they're going to create two categories within those psychoactive, non-psychoactive categories. And it's going to be natural or synthetic. And I think, the term semi-synthetic gets thrown around. There's lots of different ways to market it more effectively, but to be just, totally transparent, if you're adding catalysts, if you're adding acids, you can call it synthetic. You can call it semi-synthetic to make it sound less aggressive and you can market it better. But at the end of the day, you're doing a synthesis. And if you're doing a synthesis, what you've made is synthetic. And I think there needs to be different sets of rules for each of these categories. I think if you're making something that's hemp-derived, non-psychoactive, and is just CBD isolate, for example, I don't think you need to do these crazy tests that you're going to need to do if you're making Delta-8 or HHC or CBN or anything like that. But I think on the other side, I think that's the side that a lot of the people that are currently thinking about cannabis are very interested in, which is the psychoactive side.
Yep.
I do believe that there will be a line drawn in the sand. And I do believe that synthetic cannabinoids will be legal that are psychoactive, but there will be very stringent regulations with regard to their sale and with regard to who can consume them, 21 and over kind of a thing.
Yep.
It's my hope that there is companies such as ourselves that are able to work with the legislators on that and create a platform and a framework that protects the consumer and avoids people making Delta-8 in their bathtub. Because the thing is if you can start playing the game of synthetic psychoactives, the game keeps going. You can make psychoactive cannabinoids that are more hallucinogenic. You can make psychoactive cannabinoids that are weaker, stronger than THC. You can really play the field. And I think that's where the future of psychoactive cannabis is heading. If you look at marijuana, there's been no innovation in marijuana in the last 5 years. They made distillate about 10 years ago, and that was really cool and exciting. And they made rosin 4 years ago, and they said, hey, I'm going to take this weed and I'm going to press it in a hair straightener. That's really cool. But on the hemp side, we've been forced to innovate because of oversupply issues, because of market demands, and because in order to stay alive, you had to. So the hemp industry has been innovating.
There's so many caps in the marijuana space that it's just like when you start talking about processing, 50,000 pounds of hemp in a day, or you're talking about doing multiple ton reactions. The cannabis space is so boring. It's like, oh, great, you did diamonds. Okay, great, you did sauce. But hemp originally hemp was like, oh yeah, you're in the hemp side. Now it's like, hemp has crafted more cannabinoids, done more for this industry than marijuana by tenfold. And it's really just beautiful where hemp is now turned into basically every single cannabinoid apart from Delta-9, THC in a pure form, because now even by dry weight basis, right, that you can actually get Delta-9 products that are fully legal, fully compliant, and are converted from CBD. So the industry itself is really fascinating how it is evolved, and it's just truly wonderful to be a part of it. One thing I want to say to you, Kyle, I know a big question that people have had, and I know that you probably can't definitively say the answer to it, but with regards to HHC, I know the big thing for people is being drug testing, right? And that there is some rumors, quasi rumors about basically this metabolite possibly being able to consume these cannabinoids and not be concerned about failing a drug test. And so, of course, I know you can't just say that's the absolute truth, but can you give us your best understanding, considering you've made this product, and is this the truth?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you my understanding. Just want to emphasize again, though, I have no definitive claims on any side of the fence on this.
Sure.
But in my experience, so the thing about this conversion is it obviously starts as pure THC. Yep. And then you take pure THC and you hydrogenate it down into pure HHC. So there is always going to be some level of THC in this product. We can go down low. We can go down to 0.0001%, but 0.001% still has THC. And if it's non-detectable, get a better piece of equipment. You can look down to parts per billion, parts per trillion. They just awarded a Nobel Prize about a decade ago for someone who did a way to go to parts per quadrillion. So I can tell you that almost certainly there's always going to be, like if you want to look down to parts per quadrillion, I'm sure there's THC in all of this HHC. But it's kind of what's the tool for the job, and what's the level of THC that is passable, right? That's always the $1 million question. And so
THC
from my understanding of the biochemistry yeah, exactly. So from my understanding of the metabolism of HHC, I do believe it is broken into a different metabolite than what you'll see in a traditional delta-9 THC. However, this metabolite is going to be very similar to the metabolite found in delta-9. So from my experience, what I've seen anecdotally from my customers and from their customers is the more sensitive of a test that you do, the more likely you are to pass it. So for example, if you are just peeing on a little stick and waiting 2 minutes for a result, that's not as accurate as running a full GCMS urinalysis. If you run a full GCMS urinalysis, from my experience, you are more likely to pass than if you were just peeing on a stick. And that's because they're actually able to differentiate between those two, because they are going to be very similar. But yeah, overall, I've heard both sides. I've had people tell me they failed. I've had people tell me they pass. I don't know. I can tell you that when we do it, we get our THC levels as low as physically possible while still being reasonable. And I've had people tell me both things, and typically the more detailed the test, the more favorable the result.
And I think another important
And I would like to just let you know.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no problem. So we did actually yesterday file a patent for 5 new cannabinoids.
5.
And one of those 5, yes. And we'll be announcing those periodically over the course of the next couple of months as they are scaled up. One of them is ready at scale. We have standards being certified for it right now, and we're running safety studies on it as well. So that cannabinoid is going to be live on market here within the next couple of months. And this cannabinoid is one that we are substantially more confident, again, not making any definitive claims, but substantially more confident that this will allow you to pass a drug test.
Fascinating. I can't wait to see what those cannabinoids are. And I think another important thing just to add to our viewers is that at the end of the day, you doing the research for the testing, making sure that it is a safe product, making sure that it is actually HHC. If you don't know where it's come from, if you're just consuming cannabinoids from random brands that you're buying in smoke shops that you don't really know who these people are, it's most likely better to just assume you're going to fail a drug test, because if it's Delta 8, you're definitely going to fail. And the chances of some HHC having Delta 8 in it seems pretty high at this stage if it's not purchased from a reputable vendor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say, again, a lot of the stuff I test is pretty substantial for Delta 8, whether that's 5% or 80%. I see big ranges, but very rarely do I see a truly compliant HHC product unless I made it myself. And so, yeah, I would say that is a safe statement. If you are somebody that does regularly get drug tested, depends on a drug test for your living, that kind of a thing, it is a very risky game to go buy an HHC cart and go smoke. I have seen people that are dependent for drug tests on their living, and they do it and they pass, and I'm very happy for those people, but that is a risk. And I definitely don't want anyone out there thinking that,
right? They're buying it from you though, and that's very different than somebody who is literally maybe in a red state, doesn't have medical or recreational marijuana. They go into a smoke shop, and more often than not, what I've seen is that a lot of these companies prey on states that have less education, and so they just put them out there. And so it's just really important for everybody to make sure that you have a very good idea of the brands that you're buying from and the reputability of those brands. And I know one thing, Kyle, that is coming up often for us here at Owls is, like, how do you know that something is safe? Is there a certain purity level that is like, okay, well, hey, if it's over 90%, if it's over 85, like, how do you know? And is there a purity level that you would help us to understand that is considered safe? Or how do you know that there's not impurities in those?
Right. So I would say that's a tricky question, because I can make you something that's 99% pure, but it's still poisonous, or it still has adverse effects. For example, one of the cannabinoids we thought about making for a while was CBT, or cannabitriol, not cannabicitran, often confused. That cannabinoid has been demonstrated to be an aromatase inhibitor, which is something that a lot of people that are currently on steroids take in order to prevent the formation of testosterone into estrogen. That's the kind of cannabinoid that can really affect your hormones. And so even if it's 99% pure, that doesn't mean you should go dab it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So safety is a broad term. But purity, in terms of purity, there's a couple of things you want to look at. When you're doing a synthesis, you're going to make impurities, you're going to have side reactions. That's the nature of the game. You can get impurity profiling done, and we have done that on our HHC. So the primary impurities that you're going to find in HHC that we make are going to be iso HHCs. And again, the best way to determine if something is safe is truly to get safety studies. And that's what we have done on our HHC. We got a hERG cardiotoxicity study done. We had a Ames genotoxicity done. We had a liver hepatotoxicity done, a neurotoxicity ran, as well as a lung fibroblast toxicity ran. We're also in the process of finishing up our inhalation studies for the HHC as well. And thus far, all of the in vitro studies are clean as a whistle, because like I said, we do have a little bit of, again, I'm talking 0.1, 0.2% iso HHC in our stuff. Is that safe? According to my safety studies, yes. That's the kind of, when you say safe, is it going to cause me cancer? Is it going to do this? Is it going to do that? The only way to really know is to expose human cells or mammalian cells to these compounds and see how they react.
Incredible. That's incredible. I didn't even know that companies were doing it. And again, I just want to reiterate the importance and the difference when it comes to buying something that is cheaper. When you're talking about, like, hey, we may be at a premium price, but here's your safety. You're good. Here is all of this information that you need to know that your health is going to be okay. And then you got someone there around the corner going like, well, I got it for half the price, but I don't have any
exactly
test results. It's like, I think my life is worth more than saving, 20% or something like that.
Exactly. And, that's really the message that we're trying to get across as best we can to the consumer, is that it is going to be a slightly more expensive product, but we've done our safety studies, we've done our homework, we've done our due diligence. And if you value your health, then, what's $10 extra for knowing that this has been safety studied versus something that was a little cheaper?
Yeah, no, you're 100%.
I can tell you those safety studies are not cheap.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And so tell me, Kyle, what does it look like to like create a standard? And if you can help some of us to like, who maybe have no idea of like what you're talking about, like what does this entail? What is a standard for one, right? Just for someone who has no idea, right? What is a standard? And then what does it entail for you to create something that it hasn't been done before?
Most definitely. So I'll try to give you a 10,000 foot view because it does get very nuanced and kind of muddy, but I'll make it simple. So basically, for a third-party testing lab to be trusted, they are typically something called ISO 17025 accredited. And so that means they have gone through the proper validations, their methods have been validated, they've been audited, and they can demonstrate that they are accurate, they're doing their testing properly, and it's repeatable. Anyone can open a testing lab. I could say that I have a testing lab and start doing tests tomorrow, making COAs, but they're not ISO 17025 certified. And so, labs such as KCA, Gobi, those labs are 17025 accredited, and the majority of the big testing companies in cannabis now are ISO 17025 accredited. So part of that accreditation is basically an agreement with the auditing group that you say, in order to be ISO 17025 certified, you have to use standards that are made and certified by an ISO 17034 lab. Mm-hmm. And so that lab essentially has the right to manufacture certified reference materials. And there's different levels of standard. There's a certified reference material, which is the highest level, then a reference material, then an analytical standard, then a research chemical standard. In order for ISO 17025 to be in compliance, it has to be either a certified reference material or a reference material. And basically what it looks like for us was we just took our typical HHC distillate that we make, and we separated those stereoisomers from each other via extensive chromatography. It took us about 6 weeks of chromatography to purify about 500 milligrams.
Holy shit. I mean, yeah, that's so just insane how like, and just like for people like chromatography, like if you can just help people to understand like chromatography in a basic, what is chromatography?
Yeah, in the most basic of senses, chromatography is going to be a separation of different compounds, typically based on polarity. So basically, it's typically ran through a column. So you can picture a column, and you have, say, 3 compounds in it. Some compounds, each of them have a different polarity, and so they'll flow through at a different rate because they interact with those silica gel or the silica particles either more or less based on the polarity, and they flow through at certain rates. And so if I have a mixture of 3 compounds, I can run it through this chromatography column and separate them out individually based on certain traits or characteristics that they may have.
And so you're telling us that it took 6 weeks to get like 100 milligrams. So 0.1 of a gram took you that long.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was, it's no joke because the standard is typically, the standard that we made is 500 micrograms per milliliter. So it's a half a milligram per standard. So, 100 milligrams make you 200 standards. It goes a long way, but it's quite a process. So once we had those purified individual compounds, we are not an ISO 17034 certified lab. We do not make reference materials. We do not certify reference materials. However, we knew that in order to bring this to market, we needed to get those standards certified. So we worked with a third-party ISO 17034 lab that actually did the validation, and the certification for us. So they validate it by NMR, mass spec, verify that it is what we say it is. They do polarimetry data to identify, make sure it's the proper isomer. And after they've done all of their due diligence, they use extensive analytical scales and automated pipettes in order to get the exact amount in an exact ampule. And when it's all said and done, you end up with this little bottle that's about this big, costs $400, and is a real standard. And so our standard is a ISO 17034 certified reference material, the highest level of standard. They're both about 98 to 99% total purity. The only impurity in them is the other isomer.
Fascinating. I think that is just a solid finish, Kyle, to this interview. And first of all, I just want to again say a huge thank you to you and Colorado Chromatography Labs for taking the time. As everyone knows, like, time is money, and you've put so much work into building out a lot of these cannabinoids. So it means a lot to us that you came on and spoke to us. And for anyone else who's looking to buy their HHC, they're looking to learn more, where can they find you? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so they can send us direct messages on Instagram. We're just Colorado Chromatography on Instagram. On our website, there is a form that you can fill out, and that'll go directly to our sales director, and he always shares those with me. In addition to that, our phone number is on our website. If you give it a call, you'll talk to our office manager. She's a very, very nice lady, and she'll send me all these messages, and I'll often find myself calling people, whether they're potential customers or consumers that are confused about HHC. I like to make sure that we're transparent and try to get back to as many people as we can.
Great. Well, look, Kyle, a big thank you again. I'm sure we will have to have you on again when we've got these other 5 new cannabinoids coming out. And we wish you the best. We look forward to following you on Instagram and seeing all these new cannabinoids that come out. Thank you for everything you've been doing. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
All the best. Bye-bye.